What if the war movies everyone laughed at were the ones that got it right? What if the films critics tossed aside were quietly passed around by the people who actually lived that life? Halfway between boredom and chaos, between waiting and panic, there's a version of war Hollywood usually edits out. These movies didn't polish it, they didn't soften it, and they paid the price for that honesty. Stick around, because some of the most misunderstood war films ever made are hiding truths most blockbusters never dare to touch. The Green Berets, 1968. This one was dismissed the moment it arrived. Critics rolled their eyes, audiences shrugged, and history labeled it outdated before it even aged. But veterans saw something different. They didn't see politics, they saw procedure, they saw structure. They saw a film trying, sometimes awkwardly, to preserve how units actually functioned when the pressure was real. Released in 1968, this movie came out when public opinion was shifting fast. That timing alone doomed it. Reviewers wanted doubt and conflict. This film offered confidence and order, and that made it unpopular. But veterans recognized the focus on teamwork, preparation, and responsibility. The story isn't about individual glory. It's about how people rely on systems, routines, and each other to keep moving forward. The pacing feels deliberate. Training scenes linger. Conversations sound instructional rather than dramatic. That wasn't an accident. It mirrors how real life feels when you're preparing for something that hasn't happened yet. Long stretches of routine broken by moments that demand total focus. Is it perfect? No. Is it subtle? Not really. But it captures a mindset that later films abandoned completely. Veterans respected it because it treated discipline as something earned, not mocked. It tried to preserve a version of service that was already disappearing. That alone makes it worth revisiting. Rules of Engagement, 2000. This film didn't fail because it was sloppy. It failed because it made people uncomfortable. Critics called it heavy-handed. Audiences didn't know what to do with it. But veterans locked onto one thing immediately: confusion. Released in 2000, the story centers on a split-second decision that spirals into lifelong consequences. What veterans recognized wasn't the courtroom drama. It was the chaos before it, the noise, the panic, the lack of clear information. Real life rarely gives you clean choices. This movie leans hard into that reality. The flashbacks are messy. Events don't line up neatly. Testimony changes depending on perspective. That's the point. Veterans often say that afterward, everyone remembers the same moment differently. This film builds its entire structure around that truth. Where critics wanted clarity, veterans recognized realism. Orders come fast. Situations shift without warning. And once it's over, the people involved are left trying to explain something that never felt clear to begin with. The movie also nails another uncomfortable truth. Decisions made far away are judged with perfect hindsight. The people who weren't there always speak the loudest later. Veterans felt seen by that imbalance. It's not an easy watch, it doesn't hold your hand, but it captures how one moment can follow you forever. That's why it stuck with the people who lived that pressure for real. Jarhead, 2005. Audiences expected action. What they got was waiting. Critics didn't know what to do with that, but veterans instantly understood the joke, because most of the time nothing happens, and that nothing can mess with your head more than chaos ever could. Released in 2005, this film focuses on anticipation, routine, and frustration. The story isn't driven by events, it's driven by what doesn't happen. Long days, repeated drills, conversations that circle the same thoughts again and again. Veterans often say the most accurate part is the boredom, the way energy has nowhere to go, the way confidence slowly turns into restlessness. The movie captures how people start competing over stories, memories, and imagined moments because there's nothing else to grab onto. The narration is blunt, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes funny in a dark, self-aware way. Critics wanted a payoff. Veterans knew better. Real life doesn't always deliver one. Sometimes you prepare endlessly for something that never arrives. The film also explores identity. What happens when you're trained for a role but never get to perform it? That question hits harder than any spectacle. Veterans recognized that quiet struggle immediately. It flopped because it refused to deliver fireworks. It succeeded because it told the truth. War isn't constant movement. Sometimes it's standing still while your thoughts run wild. Uncommon Valor, 1983. This one disappeared under louder, flashier movies. Critics brushed it off as outdated, but veterans saw a different story, one about age, limits, and unfinished responsibility. Released in 1983, the film follows men past their prime attempting something they know might break them. That's the key. They're not unstoppable. They're tired. Their bodies don't bounce back. Their confidence comes from experience, not strength. Veterans connected with that immediately. The movie treats preparation seriously. Training sequences feel slow and deliberate. Every movement has weight. Nothing feels casual. Even small mistakes carry consequences. The emotional core isn't heroics, it's obligation. The feeling that some things don't end just because time passed. Veterans often talk about carrying unfinished stories. This film understands that weight. Critics wanted spectacle. Veterans noticed how careful the characters were. They don't rush. They argue. They doubt themselves. That hesitation feels real. The movie doesn't pretend experience makes you fearless. It shows how experience makes you cautious. That difference matters. It's a rare example of a film respecting aging without mocking it. It may not be flashy, but it's grounded. That grounding is exactly why veterans still recommend it quietly, long after the hype faded. Bat 21, 1988. This movie strips everything down to isolation. No crowds, no sweeping speeches, just one person trying to stay alive long enough to be found. Released in 1988, the film focuses on confusion and vulnerability, rather than action. The main character isn't prepared for what happens next. That's intentional. Veterans recognized how quickly training can feel distant when circumstances change. Most of the movie is spent listening, waiting, moving carefully. Communication becomes the lifeline. Small decisions suddenly matter more than big plans. Veterans often say survival comes down to patience, not strength. This movie understands that. Critics found it slow. Veterans found it accurate. Real fear doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's staring at the ground for hours, hoping you made the right choice earlier. The connection between characters happens mostly through voices, not faces. That distance feels real. Veterans know how much trust can exist between people who never see each other. The film refuses to glamorize the situation. There's no confidence boost, no sudden turnaround, just endurance. That honesty is why veterans still bring it up when talking about overlooked films. It didn't succeed because it wasn't exciting enough. It endured because it told the truth. The Thin Red Line, 1998. This movie confused people when it came out. Some called it slow. Others called it pretentious. Veterans recognized it immediately, because real war rarely moves in straight lines. It drifts. It pauses. It gives you too much time to think. Released in 1998, this film refuses to rush. Long stretches pass where nothing explodes, nobody speaks, and the camera just sits with the characters. That silence is the point. Veterans know that waiting is often louder than chaos. Instead of focusing on tactics, the movie leans into mindset. Fear doesn't show up as panic. It shows up as distraction, as small thoughts drifting at the worst possible time. The narration feels fragmented because memory works that way under stress. Critics wanted momentum. Veterans noticed accuracy. The environment feels heavy. Heat presses down. Fatigue shows in posture, not dialogue. People move carefully, like every step costs something. The movie also avoids clean heroes. Everyone is tired. Everyone is unsure. That uncertainty resonates with people who've lived inside it. This film didn't fail because it lacked meaning. It failed because it refused to entertain in obvious ways. Veterans still recommend it because it understands that war isn't constant motion. Its endurance stretched thin. Tears of the Sun, 2003. This movie was marketed wrong from day one. Audiences expected noise and speed. What they got was restraint. Veterans picked up on that immediately. Released in 2003, the film focuses on responsibility more than action. The central tension isn't about winning. It's about choosing who you can help and who you can't. Veterans recognize that pressure instantly. Movement in this film feels deliberate. Every step looks planned. No one rushes without reason. Veterans notice how the group stays tight, how spacing never breaks, how silence is used as protection. Critics brushed it off as simple. Veterans saw the weight behind the choices. There's no celebration here. Helping someone always creates another problem. Every decision narrows future options. The environment plays a huge role. Heat, terrain, exhaustion. The movie lets those elements slow everything down. That pace feels honest. Nothing moves fast unless it has to. The film also avoids flashy dialogue. Most communication is short and functional. Veterans know that clarity matters more than clever lines when pressure builds. It flopped because it wasn't loud enough. It lasted because it respected how difficult responsibility can be when there are no clean answers. Casualties of War, 1989. This film made people uncomfortable. That was its biggest mistake. Critics didn't know how to frame it, and audiences didn't want to sit with it. Veterans understood exactly what it was showing. Released in 1989, the movie focuses on moral failure inside a unit. Not from villains, from regular people making bad choices under pressure. Veterans often say the hardest part isn't danger, it's knowing when to speak up. The story unfolds slowly. Tension builds through silence and hesitation. People look away. Conversations trail off. Veterans recognize that pattern immediately. Real damage often happens when nobody stops it. The film doesn't rush judgment. It lets the weight settle. You feel how fear, loyalty, and confusion blur together. Veterans know how hard it is to stand alone when everyone else stays quiet. Critics wanted distance. Veterans saw reflection. The movie shows how moments follow you long after they end. Memory doesn't fade neatly. It returns in pieces. This film flopped because it refused to comfort the viewer. Veterans respect it because it refuses to lie. It shows consequences without shouting, and that quiet honesty is why it still matters. Hamburger Hill, 1987. Audiences walked into this movie expecting purpose. What they got was repetition. Veterans immediately understood why that mattered. Released in 1987, the film focuses on doing the same thing again and again with no clear reason. Move forward, fall back, try again. Veterans recognize that cycle instantly. The hill itself becomes a character. Not heroic, just there, unmoved by effort. The movie shows exhaustion building over time. Faces change, energy fades, confidence erodes quietly. Critics complained that it felt pointless. Veterans nodded. Sometimes that's exactly how it feels in the moment. You're told to push, not to understand. The dialogue stays grounded. Nobody gives speeches. People complain, joke, and argue the way tired people do. Veterans recognize how humor becomes a pressure valve. There's no big payoff, no satisfying conclusion, just survival and silence afterward. That lack of closure feels honest. This movie failed because it didn't explain itself. Veterans didn't need it to. They've lived moments where effort and outcome didn't line up. That truth is what keeps this film alive long after the box office forgot it. Rescue Dawn, 2006. This film didn't attract crowds, but veterans still bring it up in quiet conversations because it understands endurance. Released in 2006, the story focuses on survival as a process, not a moment. Hunger, fatigue, and isolation wear people down slowly. Veterans recognized how accurately the body and mind deteriorate together. The pacing is relentless, but not fast. Days blur together. Hope rises and drops without warning. Veterans know how time loses shape under stress. The film avoids comfort. There's no reassurance. Small victories matter more than big plans. Every step forward feels earned. Dialogue is minimal. Most communication is practical. Veterans know that survival often becomes routine rather than dramatic. Critics found it harsh. Veterans found it familiar. The movie shows that getting through something doesn't mean you come out stronger. Sometimes it just means you're still standing. It flopped because it wasn't inspiring enough. Veterans respect it because it doesn't pretend survival is noble. Sometimes it's just stubborn. And that honesty makes all the difference. Hyena Road, 2015. This movie slipped past most people without a sound. No hype, no headlines. But veterans noticed it immediately. Because it captures something modern war films usually miss. Frustration. Released in 2015, this story isn't about winning. It's about maintaining balance in a place where every choice creates new problems. Veterans recognize the constant tension between orders and reality. What works on paper doesn't always survive contact with the ground. The pacing feels methodical. Conversations matter more than action. Decisions are weighed, not rushed. Veterans know how much time is spent thinking through second and third outcomes before moving at all. The film shows how progress can feel invisible. You do everything right and still feel like nothing changes. That quiet discouragement is rarely shown, but veterans live with it. Critics found it subdued. Veterans found it accurate. There's no clear victory, just endurance and compromise. The movie respects intelligence. It assumes the viewer can sit with uncertainty. That's why it failed with mainstream audiences. Veterans still recommend it because it understands modern service isn't about dramatic endings. It's about managing chaos without losing yourself in the process. Kajaki, 2014. This film doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need to. Veterans often say that's exactly why it works. Released in 2014, this movie focuses on a single mistake and the hours that follow. No spectacle, no shortcuts, just problem-solving under pressure. Time slows down here. Every movement feels dangerous. Every decision carries weight. Veterans recognize that sense immediately. When something goes wrong, the world narrows fast. The film avoids dramatic music. Silence does the work. You hear breathing. You hear strain. Veterans know those sounds well. Critics said it was too limited. Veterans said that limitation made it real. Real situations don't expand. They trap you inside them. Teamwork becomes the only thing that matters, not bravery, not speed, coordination, and patience. Veterans appreciate how the film shows leadership as calm persistence rather than loud commands. It flopped because it wasn't exciting enough. Veterans respect it because it shows how survival often depends on quiet discipline and trust. That honesty leaves a mark. Act of Valor, 2012. This movie was criticized almost instantly. Dialogue felt stiff. Performances felt flat. Veterans didn't care. They were watching something else entirely. Released in 2012, the film prioritizes movement, spacing, and timing. Veterans recognize that rhythm right away. It looks right because it is right. The camera doesn't exaggerate. People move with purpose. Nothing is wasted. Veterans notice how groups stay aligned, how communication stays short and clear. Critics judged it like a drama. Veterans watched it like a document. This isn't about emotion. It's about procedure. The film also respects preparation. You see how much effort goes into doing things cleanly. Veterans know that success often depends on what happens before anything goes wrong. It flopped because it didn't perform emotionally. Veterans respected it because it didn't pretend. This movie lives in a narrow lane. It stays there. And for the people who recognize that lane, it feels authentic in a way most films never attempt. A for Charlie Mopic, 1989. This movie was ahead of its time and paid the price for it. Audiences didn't understand it. Veterans leaned in. Released in 1989, the entire film is told through a camera carried by someone inside the unit. No soundtrack, no polish, just presence. The frame shakes when people move. Mud hits the lens. Conversations happen mid-stride. Veterans recognize that chaos immediately. That's what it feels like to be there. Critics wanted structure. Veterans appreciated how messy it felt. Real memory doesn't come back clean. It comes back in fragments. The film also respects explanation. Characters talk directly to the camera, explaining choices not for drama, but for survival. Veterans know how often logic must be spoken out loud under stress. It flopped because it didn't look like a movie. Veterans respect it because it didn't try to. This film captures tension without raising its voice. That quiet intensity is why it still gets recommended decades later. The Big Red One, 1980. Released in 1980, this movie didn't land with critics because it refused to behave like a movie. Veterans immediately understood why. This isn't a clean story with smooth edges. It's fragmented, uneven, and sometimes oddly quiet. That's exactly how memory works when you've lived through something instead of watching it. The film jumps from moment to moment without warning. Scenes don't build toward obvious payoffs. Important events seem to pass quickly, almost casually. Veterans recognize that rhythm. You're rarely aware you're in a defining moment until it's already behind you. Leadership here isn't inspirational or dramatic. It's tired, efficient, and focused on keeping people moving. Orders are short. Emotions stay buried. Veterans know that calm authority often matters more than speeches. The movie lingers on strange details. Small routines, awkward pauses, moments that seem meaningless at first but stay with you longer than anything loud. That choice confused critics. Veterans nodded along. This film doesn't celebrate experience. It shows how it wears you down slowly. It flopped because it didn't entertain on command. Veterans still recommend it because it feels remembered, not performed. And that quiet honesty is rare. So maybe the movies that failed weren't broken at all. Maybe they just told the truth too plainly. These films didn't chase applause. They stayed grounded, uncomfortable, and honest. And that's why veterans still pass them along quietly. If one of these stuck with you, drop it in the comments. If there's another film critics missed, share it. Subscribe for more stories that care less about polish and more about reality. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't the loudest ones.